checking out surfstrengthcoach.com. Chris Mills. Want to give you some moves just to keep your hips open, especially for these older surfers. Getting your hips into a lot of really dynamic positions just allows you to pretty much surf better. You know, you're trying to get into big turns, big dynamic lunges. There's a lot of movement in the hip. Older folks, anybody that's doing a lot of sitting at the desk, that hip joint really starts to get tight and restricted. And it starts forcing movement into the spine, injuries, knee issues, a bunch of terrible shit. You gotta keep your hips moving properly. For some of you with some issues, you need to get your pelvis really checked out and figured out if you're more of an anterior, forward tilted pelvic posture or posterior. And that'll help dictate whether you're too tight up front or too tight in the hamstrings. Some guys that I do some consults with are stretching the hell out of their hamstrings and they do not need to be. It's making things worse. That's another post. Here's some basic stuff to keep the hips opened up. Hip flexors. Anybody doing a lot of sitting, gotta get them stretched. Good one. Just up on the ball. And you come up, feeling it all through here. There's two postures of the pelvis. You can stick the butt out. That's tilting the pelvis forward. That's relaxing the stretch. And then we tilt almost kind of pelvic tuck. Get tight in that glute. You're going to feel more of a stretch. That's what you want to do. Get a stretch through the front of that hip. You're stretching out the front of the quad. Getting good hip extension is what we're working on. I'm going to show you a progressed version of this in a minute. So this is a good one. 30-second holds. You can come up into some rotations, opening up the front of that hip. Next one. These adductors, inner thigh muscles. Kind of come up into this position. Tall, little brace. This is almost a mobilization. You might feel tight on this leg, you might feel tight here. I'll go about 8 to 10. This is a good one before your surfs. Kind of work into the tight spots. You might feel some cramping in here. If you're cramping in here, it's probably because your glute medius and minimus, some hip muscles are just kind of spasming. You might need to get in there with a lacrosse ball or some foam rolling, especially with the hip flexor stretch I just showed you. A lot of tissue in here can get knotted up, so you might need to do some foam rolling to release all that. So this is basically a hip adductor mobilization. Then another really good one for the hips, it's called the 90-90. So front leg, 90 degrees, side leg, 90 degrees. The important thing here is back positioning. So some of you, this could be enough of a stretch already. You might need to have a pillow here or a foam roller or something to kind of prop yourself up. You want to keep a good neutral spine so you're not here. If you're slouching here, you're not stretching the hip. You're just getting range of motion in the spine. Get tall, almost like you're trying to stick your butt out. Lean forward, keeping this proper spinal posture. So I'm not leaning forward doing this. Getting tight through the back so the motion is occurring at the hip. Then you can turn the chest into a different direction. And of course, you do both sides. You might be tighter than one side. I'm tighter on this hip than the other hip. Spend some time working on your hips. Like I said, a lot of the older surfers and anybody doing a lot of sitting at the desk, tight hips opens up a lot of potential for back injury, knee injury, a lot of shit that is not going to get you surfing. So start stretching on your hips. Mornings, evenings, this is easy. I'm going to show you the progressed hip flexor. This is a progressed version basically of that hip flexor stretch, quad, rectus, femoris stretch, where you put your foot on the ball behind you. Some people call this a super couch, the guys that follow mobility WOD or any of that stuff. It's a good one. So, you want to get foot straight up the wall, knee right against the wall. You might want some cushioning under the knee. You may need something to support yourself with. A lot of clients that I'm first starting to work with are so tight through here, this is as far up as they can get. It's opening up all this tissue. And again, this is pretty aggressive, so take your time with this. Could take you a couple weeks, but eventually you want to get all the way tall. This is opening up all that tissue. Come into here, getting some stretches through the obliques, your psoas, your iliacus, rectus femoris down the front of the quad. You gotta keep your hips open. You gotta keep your hips moving. Stretch, get mobile. Foam roll. You might need to get in some tissue work with the lacrosse ball or the foam roller. Keep your hips moving. It'll save you a heap of trouble down the road. That's it. Get mobile, surf your ass off, stretch, eat some good food. Later.